All right. The way Charles reviewed our book created more sales than anything you can imagine. More than any advertisement. And we met people who were within sight of our offices in upstate New York, Lucien DeWolf's house there, trustee's house. We met farmers who were actually within sight of the front door of her house after Charles wrote about us in his magazine. Then we found these guys. That, to me, that indicated the tremendous reach that he has. He's going to talk to us today on a subject of his choice because we trust whatever he's going to do. Please welcome Mr. Charles Walker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Zarlinga. Stephen, I've sat through this conference so far, and I've watched all of my well-crafted sentences crash to the floor and lay there in ruins. Because I don't think there's a thing I can tell you that you haven't already heard. We have a saying in agriculture that teaching without demonstration is worthless. Yet we have in charge of our economic welfare a Council of Economic Advisors and a chairman of the Federal Reserve Board that it seems to me have learned all about agriculture and industry with a pencil on a polished desk 1,000 miles from a cornfield. They don't really cabbage on to what is going on in the minds, hearts, and the work of the people out there. They measure everything in terms of the Dow, the Dow, and the A&P and various indexes at the top of the economy, and they don't look at the bottom of the economy, where 80% of the people have lost wages, salaries, buying power, or all of them in the last 20 years. And yet, the pronouncement from these oracles is, the economy is doing well, we're on the way up. I wonder sometimes if these people are aware of the fact that we're on a little spaceship here that orbits the sun, and that the photons of light from that sun to strike Earth are really our key to existence. 14 billion years ago, they tell us there was a big bang, and some 10 billion years later, life came on the planet. And I can assure you that what happens in the physical world and the economics of raw materials is contained in that big bang, and the fact that those 22 subatomic particles arrive here, and with the agency of photosynthesis, allow life and progress and economics and everything. And to prove it, all we'd have to do, like Will Rogers says, is eclipse the sun completely, and we'd all die. Therein lies the matrix of currency and money. I've tried to explain that as best I can. The money comes, the capitalization comes from nature, from the sun, from the raw materials of the earth. All of our capital arrives in that manner, and in effect creates the equation, man debited and nature credited. And we never pay nature back. We may destroy nature, but if we make use of the renewable nature, the earth can go on and on and on. Back when I was a young college student, I worked for a little magazine called Rodeo Sports News. And one of the chores I had in those days was to help design a cartoon for our monthly cartoons. And one that comes to mind now, I came up with it, had a guy in complete cowboy regalia sitting on a saddle in his living room. And he was reading a book, How to Be a Cowboy. My wife later suggested that I might have improved it by having a picture window behind the cowboy with the dome of the Capitol in sight. We have too many of our leaders who are learning to be a cowboy by riding a saddle in their living room instead of getting up on the horse. And getting up on the horse is what raw materials economics is all about. Benjamin Franklin, writing in Matters to be Considered regarding the national wealth, April 4, 1769, said, "There are only three ways a nation can become wealthy. It can make war and capture the territory or the raw materials of someone else. Or it can indulge itself in trade and basically find a differential advantage over some other part of the world, usually based on slavery or subsistence living and sharp trading, and make a profit that way, which requires cheating. Or," he said, "you can take the raw materials of the earth that you have, your agricultural land and your seeds, especially agriculture, and you can grow it up as if, create wealth as if by magic. Now, the creation of that wealth depends on production times price. Nature has two requirements: balance and fecundity. Substitute production for fecundity, and you have the general economic picture. We, in 1933, found our American agriculture, and we found everything in complete distress. And Congress, in its 100-day foray, passed 7 U.S.A. 602, which Randy Cook alluded to the other day. The provisions of 602 were achieved within about 2 months after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. 100% of parity. I won't detain you trying to explain how parity is computed. I tell you about the history of George Warren. I think all these things have been covered here today. It's enough to say that production times price equals income. Full production times a full price in terms of that broad spectrum average is full income, and half of production times no price, or full production times no price, is still no income. Back in 1930s, Roosevelt managed to get an appropriation to hire a Russian immigrant who was a famous economist named Simon Kuznets. He and his team developed the economic indicators, which we still have. It's on the internet. They publish it, I think, every other month. And the economic report of the president is also based on the general schematic. Those 6 sectors of the economy, which Randy explained to you, have to move in some sort of a synchronized basis in terms of a base period that you find acceptable to yourselves. What is acceptable? We like to have full employment. We don't want a bunch of idle people. We want everybody to have a job or find employment if they're willing and able. We don't want our price structures ruptured too seriously through import invasion. This, of course, we've experienced over the last 40, 50 years. We want a general stability. In other words, either a lack of inflation or inflation very much in control, and I'm not talking about 3-4% a year, because 3% inflation in 10 years, you know what that comes to. That formula was used during World War II. We at that time had about 14% of the national income went to agriculture, to feed the people. We are now down to less than 1%. Now, the problem with all this is you cannot regulate the value of money or monetize the raw materials. In effect, you don't monetize them in the sense of putting them in the Fort Knox like you do gold, but in the transition. You monetize them if they go into trade channels at the appropriate price in balance with industry, wages and capital costs, rentals, and the corporations, their income. Now the question is, you say that all income is based on raw materials. The key income is, admittedly, we can have speculation, we can roll dice across the table, and with each pass of the dice build national income, but services and entertainment and those kind of things have to depend on a sound raw materials and manufacturing basis. And this is what we have given up in homage to free international trade. Years ago, during the Roosevelt administration, I was acquainted with a guy named Lee Fryer. I became acquainted with him later. He worked for Henry Wallace in a resettlement administration. I can assure you that Roosevelt and the economists of that hour did not have in mind demolishing the farm system we had in the United States, which was largely characterized as a family farm system. Indeed, they wanted to strengthen it, and this was the reason for raising those commodity prices to be in harmony with what other people were getting, including labor and capital costs. When this was accomplished during World War II, and for the several years thereafter, we thought we'd found the key, and we passed the Employment Act of 1946. Now, Edwin Norris and Leon Kaiserling and Harry S. Truman did not wish to abolish those farm units we had. But 2 years after that act was passed, and the main fallout from it has apparently been the establishment of a Council of Economic Advisors, which no one pays attention to, and the economic report of the president. We had the 80th Congress, and the 80th Congress passed the Aiken Bill in 1948. Now, something very significant happened that year when they passed that. Truman signed it because he was going into a convention the next morning in Philadelphia to be nominated to run against Thomas Dewey. And so he signed the bill that would say the Secretary of Agriculture will regulate basic storable commodity from 82% of the harvested acres at between 60 and 90% of parity on the then usable base period, which was still 1910, 1914. There was another decision that went with that, which has never been talked about very much. They decided that we were going to have done with that family farm and these diversified units, and that we were going to have an industrial agriculture and an industrial food supply. which indeed we now have. That food supply has delivered for us a cancer profile where 1 in 3 people in the United States can expect to have cancer before they die. Every 2 days, we have a cancer 9/11 in the United States. That's how many people are taken by that. Because we accepted a false science and put a big business on the other side of the equal sign. In order to create the money, you have to monetize the raw materials used to operate the economy on a per annum basis, on a flowing basis. This was the theory that we operated on when Guy Gillette, Burton K. Wheeler, and the fellow from Montana, and those great senators were in the Senate. And if you will go back to into the 1940s, when the House was considering these kind of measures like the Stegall Amendment and the War Stabilization Act, the preface to those bills always carried that in compliance with the congressional mandate that we coin the money and regulate the value thereof, and regulate the value thereof. We are doing what that act is going to do. I really don't know how to get this across to people, because we have an educational block. It's been discussed here so often, it demolished everything I had written down I was going to say to you. I don't want to repeat everything. It's the reason I'm sort of hesitant here. But it's demolished our industry, sent it overseas. We've created a situation where a businessman with 50 employees has 2 uneasy choices. He can either move out of the country or go bankrupt. We've lost well over 6 million of these family farm units. In the process, we've created mega farms. I know people in western Kansas and Oklahoma farming 2, 3, 4 sections of land. I can assure you that with rare exceptions, they are all technically bankrupt. Instead of monetizing the raw materials, we're going the Federal Reserve route because it has accommodated the big lie. We've had a big lie in our own time that we were going to war because of weapons of mass destruction, and someone has suggested that the real weapon of mass destruction was the euro, which there were threats that certain people were going to instead of the dollar. The dollar, as constructed as a reserve currency by the Bretton Woods Agreement, was demolished on August 15, 1971, the very year that I started Acres U.S.A. One of the advisors to Lord Keynes was Benjamin Graham, and his entire plan is published in a book called Storage and Stability. Now, we're not talking about storage in the crude physical sense I mentioned before, but in the equation that worked out how much money that could be issued without bringing on the horrors of inflation. Keynes rejected it probably because he was a sick man, and probably because the people at the conference were not in tune with what was being said. In addition to these things, we have visited this bad science and big business on the population at large. I mentioned the cancer profile, but we also have warehouses full of Alzheimer's patients. We have all kinds of programs that have been designed to protect the health, which were really designed to demolish what's left of the free agricultural services, including the cow-calf operator. He can no longer expect to be free to run his cows because now we have a national identification system. These things are, and the national identification system is going to make the cow-calf operator basically a concessionaire for the state, with a government gumshoe coming out and telling him how not to ride a horse, but how to raise a cow. These are all consequences of the monetary system that we have become saddled with in the wake of a big lie in 1913. It was under the second term of the Wilson administration. I grew up in western Kansas. Kansas was largely a German settlement state. We had a German language newspaper in every county in the state of Kansas at one time. Most of them went broke during World War I because an order went out from the White House to not to the Postmaster General not to deliver the mail. The term I always heard was der schlechte Wilson. That's German for the evil Wilson. I swear before I was 12, I thought that was his first name. Steve, since everything I had intended to present here has already been handled, I think I'll close up and open it for questions if anyone has any questions.